For the readers, I don't think I've mentioned this, but my last completed book was the third book in a trilogy. It's called The Dream Rider Saga. I'm very proud of it. It's got all the reviews on Amazon are 4.5 and up for the 3 books. I think you will really, really, really like it. I'm very proud of those, and I think you'd have a lot of fun. It's got a diverse cast of characters, multiracial, orientation, and I am based in Toronto and then in Peru. Sort of my nod to something I loved as a kid, which was both superheroes, but also lost cities in the jungle. So I tried to mush them together, and I'm happy with the result. The writers, hold your breath and check back, and maybe in April, I'm working on another book for writers. This time it's on the craft side, and I'm calling it, working title, it may change, but I'm calling it Brick by Brick, How to Build a Story. And I'm in it, I'm giving what I think is a different approach to how you look at going from a story idea to building a story structure using scenes and how to use things properly. So yeah, that's going to be exclusive in a story bundle. If the readers can Google story bundle, but it should be coming out mid-April. Curated by Christine Catherine Rush, so the content of that bundle is.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Living the Next Chapter podcast. It's the author podcast where I get to meet great authors from around the world. And what I love is when I get to talk to somebody closer to home. I'm thrilled to speak to authors globally, but it's nice to always come back home and talk to somebody who knows where I live and has lived this kind of life here in Canada as well. So we're excited to have Douglas here on the podcast today. He's got a lot to talk about, not only from his own writing and stories that he loves to tell, but also resources to help authors. So he's the perfect combo for what we try to do here on Living the Next Chapter. Celebrate authors and encourage you on your journey, but also give readers something to fall in love with. So Douglas is here, and we're going to have a great conversation. Douglas, welcome to the show. Nice to have you here on Living the Next Chapter.
Great to be here, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So I mentioned you're here in Canada, so as I. Can you tell everybody where geographically you are here in Canada?
Yeah, the easy answer is Toronto, but we're actually in a suburb just northeast of the city.
Good.
Up in a place called Unionville.
Beautiful. Excellent.
So you and I are sharing the hope that this pile of snow that we've had dumped on us for the last 2 months is slowly dwindling. We're actually getting double-digit temperatures up here.
Right.
And double-digit in Canada, folks, that's in Celsius.
Yeah.
So.
There's some math involved there. I'm sorry. But yes.
Yeah.
I just did my first story of the day. There you go. Good. Got that in. And we're both kind of a little, maybe I want to speak for myself, a little dragging today. We lost an hour with our overnight change in our Eastern time zone. So last night. So yeah, everything's a little off for me a little bit today, but I'm getting there. It's good. Did that time change affect you at all, Douglas?
I have my coffee, so
okay,
I'm good.
We are hashtag sponsored, just like that. I like that. Great. We, like I was mentioning in the intro, Douglas, and we chatted, I have a lot of authors who listen to the show. They come here looking for inspiration from someone who's further down the road than they are as a newly minted author to be. And they're just looking for some kind of guardrails, some kind of insight, some kind of motivation to find their voice as a writer. With all of the things you've done in the past to help authors and help writers, and from your own experience, what do you think would have been helpful for you to hear early on as a writer, maybe in a conversation, like on a podcast like we have today, that really could have given you kind of that, well, we call it our North Star, but that thing that you should be focused on, that maybe that motivational piece you needed early on? How can we encourage an author listening? Yeah, it's a pretty broad ask, but how can we encourage that author today listening on finding their voice maybe as a writer?
Wow. I think early on, I wish someone had told me just do it, just start writing. I waited until I was in my early 40s before I finally sat down and started chasing the writing dream. And that all came about, I started then because one of my all-time favorite authors had passed away at a far too early age, Roger Zelazny. And you always tell yourself, I'm gonna do it someday. I'm gonna have the time, and then it just made me realize I wouldn't necessarily have the time. I think the other thing, and I tell this to all beginning authors, it doesn't matter what age you are, is there's a tendency to want to sit down and write that great North American novel. Really, really, I strongly recommend you start with short stories. It's just easier. That first novel is going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible because you're learning as you're writing, and it's hard to write. It's hard to learn from writing just one thing, one huge project. The example I give is, okay, let's say that novel is 100,000 words and you get it done. Your other option was that you sat down and you wrote 25,000 word short stories. And in those short stories, this is what I did when I started with short fiction, obviously. And I tried something new with every new story. So you try, present tense, first person, third person, narrative, omniscient narrator. I tried fantasy, high fantasy, urban fantasy, science fiction, horror. So I tried everything over my first 20 stories. Every one of them I could point to and I say, okay, that one I was trying to do this. I introduced this new thing I was going to try. After those 100,000 words, you're going to have a lot more what I call, tools in your writer's toolbox. You're going to have tried more things. Doesn't mean you've mastered every one of them, but you're going to be able to handle more scenarios. In that 100,000 word novel, you have to have picked a genre. You'll have to pick a voice. Might be able to alternate voices, but the point is you learn more in writing starting with short fiction. The other advantage, Dave, is that when you write the stories, you got to send them out to market, and then you start getting feedback. And the first bit of feedback is going to be rejections. Yeah. It's going to be rejection. Then you start to get an encouraging piece of feedback, which is some sort of personalized rejection. Sounds like an oxymoron, but you're going to have some editors that we really like this, but we had a very similar story from a big name author, and we took that for this issue. Right. But looking forward to seeing your next one. And that really helps a beginning author.
Yeah, I think well that's I like the framing of that too, because it's not a no to you. It's not right now for the style of what you've written. Yeah, that's interesting, because they want to compete with their own authors, right? And have two authors going at each other for the same market, right? So that makes a lot of sense. So I like that.
Yeah, they don't want their readers to be disappointed saying, "Hey, I just read almost the same story, two stories back in this issue."
Yeah.
So, yeah,
great. The idea of this show is I really wanted Doug to give authors a kind of a foothold, an advantage, a leg up, I guess, early on, so they don't feel so alone in this journey. Like, there's a lot of resources online. There's a lot of books about writing, but to hear it from a first-hand account of somebody doing it, I think is A, it's motivational, and B, I think it just kind of gives people just a little cheat code, I guess, maybe, just to help them and encourage them. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I don't want to start with a plug, but
yeah,
I had so many beginning writers, that I'd meet at conventions or something, and they'd come up to me and they'd say something that they're doing, and you want to be helpful and enthusiastic, but a lot of times what they've done is a really bad mistake. And so I wanted to find a way where I could kind of give them a safe path forward if they're going to start. So I actually did write a book called Playing the Short Game. Just came out in its second edition, and it's aimed at beginning writers. And it explains why short fiction is the way to start, and then it also steps you through everything you need to know to sell your first story, and then if it's sold, to work with an editor, look out for traps in a contract, etc., and then basically build a career in short fiction. So same attitude. I did that because I wanted to kind of pay it forward to writers who are coming up.
Yeah, and I'm on your website, smithwriter.com, while we're chatting, and you have a tab on there for writers, and I love that. There's a reason why these things are on everyone's websites, but you actually have things directed towards the authors we're trying to help here at the beginning. So we'll have a link, obviously, for your website. We'll talk more about that as we chat, but I'm just glad to see that you got something there for writers as well. That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's jump in. You have well, we're going to have a 2-hour, 3-hour conversation just around your books alone, but you have like a pretty rich background on what you love to write and kind of your approach to this. As you look back at what you've been working on in the past, can you kind of identify for us how your audience has kind of developed over time? Because we kind of have an idea of who we think we're writing to when we first start, but it kind of morphs over time and your audience becomes more and more clearer. How has your audience grown or changed over the years?
Slowly. The growth part.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a clear idea who my audience is. I have a newsletter, and I have a number of rabid fans on that one who I always know I can reach out to if I want a beta reader, if I want a group of ARC readers, etc. They have pretty diverse tastes, which is good because, when I started out short stories, I just wrote everything. I wrote any story idea I had. I didn't tie myself to a genre or anything. When I started writing novels, written 4 novels so far, they're all in urban fantasy. One's a shapeshifter, and the other one is my own take on YA urban fantasy superheroes. A very unusual superhero. I don't know if I didn't know when I started writing those if there'd be an audience for any of that, because I write the books I want to write. I write the stories I want to write. I know I keep getting bugged by fans who love my first novel. It's called The Wolf at the End of the World, and it's a shapeshifter novel. It's in my own universe of shapeshifters, and I keep getting people asking, when are you going to write the next one in that series? Because I sort of don't leave it on a cliffhanger, but I leave it obviously that it's going to be more in this series. So I know I have some people who like that series. The trilogy's done well so far. I didn't really expect that I'd ever be writing more in that universe, but we'll have to see. But right now, having said that, right now I'm writing a near future post-apocalyptic science fiction novel, which ties into a number of my short stories. There's a story called Memories of a Dead Man, and it kind of, I wrote that story because I knew I'd eventually write a novel. And I wanted to explore the main character, this dead man character, from the viewpoint of other characters around him. So you're never in his head in that story, in his point of view. And I did that purposely because I wanted to feeling for who this character was and other people thought of him. Right. I wrote a character where you're in his head quite a bit now.
This might seem like a little bit of an interesting little diversion here, but I was talking to a person who does like really fancy like ceilings in people's houses. And I'm like, wow, like you're just like an artist, the way you can craft these beautiful ceilings, just big mansions and stuff. I said, if I was you, I would like to kind of like, sign this somehow and just autograph my work, right? I said, do you ever do that? He's like, well, no, I can't. I can't visually write my name on somebody's ceiling. He said, but I always sign the ceiling before I start. And then I go over top of my so it's always there. And every project I do, my signature is there. You might not see it, but I know it's there. And as authors, I think you have your own unique signature that makes you compared to everyone else that writes books. So what do you think your unique signature is? Even if it's not blatantly out there, it's on the cover of your book, but your signature of you as a writer that you kind of blend into what you do. What's kind of one of the commonalities across so many different types of books that you have in your library that you might say, well, this would be Douglas's signature? Do you have something like that?
Yeah, I think if I have to pick one, and it does come up in a lot of reviews, which makes me happy because, the thing I love, Dave, when I read stories, the thing that pulls me in, or the reason I stop reading a story or watching a TV series or whatever, is the characters. If I can connect to the characters and I feel that they're well defined, they're different from each other, they all have little quirks and sharp edges to them, I'll keep watching or I'll keep reading. And probably the most common thread in reviews of my work is I'm really good at developing characters. And even in the short stories, that's what always makes me happy when I hear that you write a 3,000 word short story and someone says this. First of all, it seems so much bigger, but I could connect to these characters within the first few sentences. They seem built to me.
Wow.
So I'd say that's number one. This one's kind of weird because the other one that comes up a lot is I'm often described as a very visual writer, very cinematic. Oh, I could see this at the movie or something like that. I find it kind of funny because the thing I struggled with for so long, and I still don't enjoy it, but it's describing the setting. It's giving the reader the visuals of the scene. And I guess if you know you're struggling with something, eventually you focus on it enough that you're half decent at it.
Yeah.
But it always makes me laugh because I enjoy writing characters. I don't enjoy writing setting.
Yeah, that was one of my next questions. What's one thing that you love about the writing process, and one thing that you kind of seem to kind of push down the priority list and kind of becomes a thing you have to do when you have to do it, but it's not your first thing that you want to do? So
yeah. It would be setting. Yeah.
Really.
And the first novel I wrote, I was aware that I hated setting, and you get a kind of head of steam going when you're writing one day, and then you come to a passage where, okay, the character's just arrived in this small northern Ontario town. She steps off the bus, and I've got to describe what she's seeing around her.
Yeah.
And I would just put square bracket, insert description of street scene here, and end square bracket, and then move on, and go back and do it. And it worked because, as you say, eventually you have to do it. But I remember being in a workshop run by Christine Catherine Rush, who your listeners may know. She's a multi-award winning author and editor. She used to edit magazine of fantasy and science fiction. She writes across all genres, like every fantasy, romance, science fiction, mainstream, and a really good teacher of craft. And I was in one of her craft workshops, and she started by walking up to the whiteboard and writing, setting is character, and then kind of asking us, what do you think that means? And, a lot of people would say, well, Hemingway's Old Man in the Sea, the setting can be an actual character in the story. Thinking that they nailed it. She said, nope. So what she was saying is that when you're writing a scene in a story, whether it be a short story or a novel, but you have to be in a character's point of view. So if it's going to be very different if you have, they did in my first novel, I had a blind character. So when they walk into a room, you can't describe it visually. You have to use their senses. So her first point was, whatever you describe has to be through the senses of your point of view character. And she said, but it also should tie into whatever their emotional situation is. So, example, if a teenage girl walks onto a beach, and when she was 6, her older brother drowned on a similar beach, you have to mention some sort of emotional reaction. And I say have to, but it actually helps. I found it helped so much that if I could find something in my character, because I love writing character, that I could use to describe the setting to the reader, that also tied into the emotions of the character. And a great way to give backstory too on a character. So anyway, that was one of my biggest aha moments as a writer, and totally changed the way I address setting now.
Yeah, I love learning from authors because, we fall in love with our favorite author, and we see kind of their journey, and we're like, think, how, especially with somebody prolific who's been writing for a long time and has, again, so much variety to what you do. You're just like, how did they get here? Like, you're just like, I've had one author on, I think he has like 60 books. And I'm like, come on now. Like, can you save some writing for everyone else? Wow, you just got so much to offer. And I can tell an author who loves what they do, right? Not just in the sheer volume, but the passion they have for what they do, right?
I wish I had 60 books. I'm not a fast writer.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Dave, back to, what I wish I'd done differently is I waited. I spent like the first 10 years just writing short fiction. I think it made me a much better writer. Yeah. But I wish I'd kind of jumped into the long form earlier.
Okay, so before we jump into what we're working on right now and what we're chatting about on the show, with so much to offer to readers, it can be a little bit overwhelming for a new reader coming into your world because they really don't know where to start unless you just go back by date and start at the beginning of when you first started. But in podcasting, same thing. We have a lot of episodes. It's hard to know where to begin. And you just see this wall of content and you're like, I just don't know where to start. So do you have a good starting point for someone new coming into your world that you're like, maybe this would be a good appetizer, a good taste test for you if, this is going to be a series and an author that you might enjoy falling in love with? Do you have a good starting point for somebody?
It depends if they like short fiction. If they like short fiction, I just pick up one of my collections. Yeah. So collection was Impossibilia. The advantage to that is it has a story called Spirit Dance in it, which was the very first story I ever wrote and sold. And it also became the kind of the prequel story to my first novel, The Wolf at the End of the World. If you like shapeshifters, try that. You can also pick up Spirit Dance as an individual short story for a couple of bucks. And then I wrote 2 other stories in that universe, what I call the Hiroka universe. The Hiroka are my race of shapeshifters. So you try those short stories. If you want to try all 3 of them and some more, I reprinted Spirit Dance and for the first time collected the other 2 short stories into my 3rd collection, which is coming out March 15th. So you could try all the Hiroka stories there if you pick up that book. But if you want to get a good taste of my writing, any of the collections, so there was Impossibilia, Chimeroscope was what I call my first full collection. It was 16 short stories. And then the new one, new collection is called Borderlanz with a Z on the end because I got to be different and science fiction-y. And it's coming out March 15th and it's got 15 stories. And if you like the Hiroka stories, then try The Wolf at the End of the World. And I do promise there will be a sequel to that. My favorite authors and who became a friend over the last couple of decades, Charles DeLint, he wrote the intro to Wolf at the End of the World, and he keeps bugging me. He says, "When are you going to write the next book?" So I have promised that I will.
It's nice when someone else like that picks up on what you're doing and is cheering you on as well and wants more. That's a good sign. Yeah. That's a good sign. Let's talk about.
Yeah, he wrote. Sorry, yeah. Another on Charles. He wrote the intro to the upcoming collection as well. So wow. I imposed on him once again. He kind of wrote that intro.
It's amazing. Let's talk about Borderlanz and let's go a little bit deeper on that as well, because I think as readers, this is something that we can fall in love with. And right now, I'm looking at your website. Pre-orders are out for this right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you want to save a couple of bucks, you can pre-order it now. Any major retailer, Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Apple, Google Play, and there's a few others, smaller ones. You can pre-order it now, and then it will be delivered to you, however that website delivers their ebooks, when it drops on March 15th. It is maybe something for the writers. Again, back to the recommendation of starting with short fiction. So the first book length form I put out was a collection. It was a mini collection called Impossibilia from a UK, very respected UK press called PS Publishing. And then I did my novel, and then I did my second collection. The point is, if you start with short stories, you're going to, and you start selling them, you're going to build up this backlist of short fiction where the rights have come back to you. Another reason to buy my short game book. It explains what not to do and how to protect your rights when you're selling short stories. But assuming you've protected your rights, all these stories are yours again. You can resell them to other short fiction markets. Or once you get enough, you can package them into what's called a collection. And a collection is just a book of short stories from a single author. So it's something to keep in mind, and it's another way you can use short fiction to build a writing career. So, I'm writing novels. I'm working, like as I said, on my fifth novel, but at the same time, I've been working on putting out third collection, so that you always have yet another book out there for your fans. The approach I take is I don't include a story in a collection unless it's already been sold to a professional short fiction market. The rights will come back to you. You take a bunch of these stories and you put them together into a new book. You try, good advice is that you always put one story in that has never appeared anywhere, so that your super fans who have probably read everything will look at it and say, well, I've read everything. So, wait, here's a new one. Yeah. So they might hopefully pick up that collection just so that they have that story as well.
Okay, so from a reader's perspective who has never written a book, the difference between 15 short stories in a novel compared to 15 chapters in a book, the story arc part of this, because typically a single book will have a beginning, middle, and end, but it seems like 15 individual stories seem like it takes a little bit of work to tie them together in one cohesive story. Am I getting this correct? Like, how is a short story approach to a novel differ for the reader than a typical chaptered book like we would anticipate?
There are occasional collections, mostly in anthologies. Like an anthology is a book of short stories from different authors. Yeah. Those tend to be themed. So it might be, cat anthology, speculative fiction cat anthology. It could be alien first contact stories, right? So there'll be a very similar theme. So when the reader reads one story and then move on to the next, they expect obviously a different story, a different approach, etc. But they do expect somewhere in there's going to be a first contact element to that story. In a collection, they're all different. And as I said, I write everything. I write humorous, dark fantasy, humorous fantasy, high epic fantasy, dark science fiction, funny science fiction, space opera, space exploration, everything. You'll find every type of story in my three collections. Again, in my book, The Short Game, I talk about putting together a collection. And one of the things I say that is the hardest thing to do in a collection is you, the author, you have to figure out what order to put these stories in.
Right.
Because obviously they have to be in some sort of order. So you need to give some thought to what I call the reader experience. So the readers just finish this story that you decided to put first, and then they're going to go on to this one. Oh, if your opening story was a real dark science fiction story, what do you want to follow that up?
Yeah.
Want to follow up another dark one, or maybe something a little lighter? And if you've got a mix of genres in your collection, maybe you want to switch to fantasy. Up to you. It's your choice. It's your collection. But what I stress to them is think about the reader experience. How would you feel as a reader if you read story A and then you went into story B? Is that good? Maybe you can ease them into that super, super dark story that you have and give them something a little lighter or more positive. And maybe if it is super dark, you follow it up with something that's really positive. So there's a lot of thought that goes into a collection. I don't know if I've got the right sequence, in any of my collections. No one's ever commented on that. But the advice that you generally hear, and this is mostly from professional publishers who do collections and do anthologies, is you want to figure out what your 3 best stories are, maybe your 4 best stories out of the collection. And you want to start with your 2 of your best, because you want to pull them in right away, especially if they're browsing in a bookstore and they start reading the first story. You want it to grab them right away, pull them in. And then you don't want it to sag immediately after that. So you want another good story after that. And, okay, now I'm going to keep reading this. This guy's good. And you want to leave them with a really good feeling at the end. So it doesn't mean it's a happy story, but you want to leave them with a good memory of an excellent story. So you put another strong one at the end. And then you put what you think is your another strong story in the middle, as they say, as a tent pole, in case things are flagging. You pick them up again and get them hooked again, and they keep reading. It's hard to do, because another thing Chris Rush always tells us is you're the worst judge of your own work. So the story that you think is so good, other people are like, I don't know, that sucks. It helps when if you're doing a collection, you've sold these stories. So I start Borderlands. I start with an award-winning story. So I'm thinking that's fairly safe, and it's one I really like. It's different. It's got a great hook in the first line, and I end with a story I sold to a magazine of fantasy and science fiction, which has always been my dream market, and so I put that story at the end. The point is, it's subjective, and you've got to kind of try to put yourself in the reader's head and look at what the emotion is that the reader will have finishing that story, and then deciding how you want them to feel going from there to the next story. It's tough. It is tough.
Yeah. No.
And you have to balance genre, and you have to balance length. If you start with a 10,000 word story, you probably don't want to follow it up with a 8,000 word story. You want to put in something shorter, so they can kind of take a breath.
Interesting. Like, I'm listening to you talk about this, and I'm in my context, I'm not an author, but I'm a musician. And what we do on an album, what we do in concert, is we assemble our songs in a logical way that takes people on a journey from beginning, middle, end. We want to start big in concert, but on the album, we might want to start softer and take you from kind of a more thoughtful approach to more celebratory at the end. Like, you have this freedom of how you arrange what you do in a certain way that for the outcome you're trying to get to, right? So we put a lot of time and effort into why is song one on the album? Well, it's because we want to invoke this kind of response from our audience by hitting play for the first time and go, wow, right? And same thing in concert. We want to have that first note to be the thing that makes people come rushing into the room and go, oh, it started, right? That's kind of the idea. So I'm listening to you talk about this and going, there's a real interesting parallel from my world to your world, and how we both do approach these similar idea of how we kind of arrange this for the sake of the audience. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So my granddaughter, Bridget, has her musical project is called His Wife. She's a Toronto indie singer, songwriter, performer. Nice. And she started to drop. She's had a number of EPs, won a couple of awards, and she's putting out her first LP this year. And I think there's like 4 singles that are me dropping month by month until it comes out. So it's interesting because I've never had that conversation with her.
Interesting.
Probably because she's never done an LP before. But I'm gonna ask her. I'm gonna say, so how did you come up with the sequence? Like, how did you decide what song A is and song B and what one you wanted to finish with? I'm from the vinyl era, so I would have said, so what went on side A and side B? But there's not that.
No.
Although I think she is going to do a vinyl for this one, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, thanks. I'm gonna have that discussion with her.
The other side of it too, I think, Doug, is the fact that you're not asking from readers when they look at like Borderlands, you're not asking them to commit to the entirety of the story. You're asking them to commit to a story within stories. So there's a lighter lift maybe for people coming into your world as a reader as well, because you get the payoff sooner in the short story than you do over a longer single story as well. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic as well for the readers.
Yeah, if you've never read short fiction before, it definitely is a mindset change. But I've had some early reviews on Borderlands, and they've been from people who said, I don't really read a lot of short fiction, but I got pulled in by this story, and again they comment they like my characters and how they seem so fully developed in just a few thousand words. But it's a different experience, and my comment is usually you're going to find something that you like in this book. You're going to find some story that you really love. And back to the what sequence do I put them in? I'm already been surprised by some of the reviews that call out their favorite stories, and my reaction, really, that one? It was sort of a light tongue-in-cheek story, and you really loved it. So yeah, again, you're the worst judge of your own work, and you never know how a reader is going to react to a story, whether it be a novel-length story or a short story.
In a short story, you don't have the luxury of a slow burn, I would think, about character development over a period of time and a lot of backstory and world building, all of that stuff that a traditional novel might include. So in a condensed period of time, you really got to get people from, I don't know who this character is, to caring about who your character is and bought in. So doing short stories, does that then translate into a more traditional novel that you would write that's a standalone with one story, beginning, middle, and end? Does it change your approach to more of a non-short story project as well?
I think by the time you've written a lot of short stories, I did before I finally tried a novel, you've developed this toolbox of what you need as a writer. But yeah, in short fiction, everything you said, you've got to do that. It's present in a novel, but you got to do it in a short story. You still need the full character development, so the character doesn't seem a sketch. It seems fully rounded and deep. And you need all the world building, so you can immerse the reader in it. And you have to do that in the space of, short story. I got a couple of flash pieces. Most of my short stories range from the 3,000 to 7,000 words. Some of them over 10, but most are kind of in that window. You've got to do all that. And what you said about not wasting time. No, if you're selling short fiction, it means you've hooked the reader, the editor, that's your first reader, right away. So that means the first line, in fact, the book I'm writing right now on the craft of fiction, I've got a section on opening lines. And you have to do a lot. That opening line has to ideally, it introduces a character. It introduces the problem that character is going to have to either solve or fail to solve in the story. You have to give the reader an indication of what genre this story is in. Because if they only love fantasy and your first line says, well, this could be fantasy, and then they're 3 paragraphs down before they realize you're writing science fiction, they're not going to be happy. So that's character, problem, genre, and you have to write that first line so it's got a really cool hook. So people are going, whoa, I'm going to keep reading. I got to go from that first sentence to the second sentence. So that's a huge amount of heavy lifting for a one sentence in a short story. But that's a great way to start a novel, too, if you've got that good a sentence to start a novel. And it's a great way to start every chapter in the novel. So I think you'll learn a lot. And I know I certainly learned how to be very concise in my prose. I started, every word has to count, not just every sentence, every word has to count in a short story. I learned how a reader could infer a backstory to this character from just a couple of lines or an emotional reaction, how they could infer a bigger story universe by just a couple of lines. And it is a comment I get a lot in my short fiction. It just seems like a bigger world than I thought you could cram into a 3,000-word short story. when you move to novels, that helps you. I mean, it helps you to learn. I would write my first short story and it'd be like 8,000 words, and all the markets back then were 5,000 words max. So you got to be very good at cutting words out. So I know if I write a 5,000 word scene, I'm not going to be able to cut that down to 3,000 words anymore. You'd be able to cut it down to 4,800, my prose style. I've learned how to write. I've learned how to write a sentence as well.
Okay, so for readers, Doug, with Borderlands coming out, if you could, I've purchased my copy, it arrives at my house, you somehow appear on my doorstep, which is kind of weird, but you show up on my doorstep and you're like, wait a minute, before you read this book, before you read these 15 short stories, I want to tell you this one thing about Borderlands, because I think it's really going to help you connect with this book. My love letter to you as a reader, before you read this book, before you crack the cover, is, what would you say to this person who's ready to read this book for the first time? They might be your first time reader ever, and Borderlands is their first copy of first foray into your writing. You're standing there right in front of them. You're like, before you read this, I want to tell you this one thing. What would you say?
I don't know, because I put so much thought into, it's in the right order. So sort of my reaction would be start reading. I might ask them, okay, do you like genre fiction? Do you like science fiction, fantasy, etc.? If they say no, I'm going to say, okay, you've got an adventure ahead of you. Hopefully this will hook you. But I'd probably ask them, do you like a particular genre? And there is a mainstream story in there, which is a very personal experience of me and my wife and our second son. And there's science fiction, there's horror, there's fantasy. So I might ask them, do you have a preference? And if they say, well, I really like horror, then I'd probably point them to the horror story, or I'd probably point them to one of the really dark fantasy or dark science fiction stories. Other than that, I think, I'm confident I put the stories in an interesting and cool manner, and I'd say just dive in. Here's my email. Tell me what you think.
I like too how you mentioned about how reviews are so important for you to kind of get your signature established and people to respond, and kind of them to tell you what they're seeing as your signature as an author. I like to encourage all the people listening to leave detailed reviews, thoughtful reviews, to put some effort into it as a reader, because I think we can owe that to our favorite author, not only to encourage them, but to tell other people why these books are so important to us as a reader. Just can you help reinforce the idea that reviews matter to authors from a reader's perspective, that we can really influence and encourage authors through our words? Is there anything else that, from an author's perspective, that speaks to you from a review from one of your readers?
Well, first of all, thanks, Dave, for mentioning that, because it's totally true. Reviews are incredibly important to authors. If you're a beginning author and you get your first story published, when you get your first positive review, it's going to be a thrill. You'll go back and read that, learn how to do pull quotes. Another thing I cover in the short fiction book. They encourage other readers to take a chance on a writer if they've never heard the writer's name before. They help, the retailers, give them a reason to, push the book up in their algorithms. And to the writer, him or herself, they are important. They are a form of encouragement. We all have fragile egos, and we all love to hear stuff about our books. Having said that, one of the things I recommend in my short story book, the short game, is when you do sell your first short story, don't read the reviews. Because the problem, especially with a beginning writer, is a negative review on your first sale can be absolutely devastating. Just send them into a spiral of depression, and they'll never write again. So another piece of advice is get a trusted friend to be your review filter. So They can put out a Google search for the title of your book, and when they come across a review, they can read it. And their charge, what you charge them with, is that they pass on the good reviews to you. They never mention the bad reviews. And they don't even say something, yeah, I found 12 reviews. I'm sending you 2 of them.
No, don't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's
It's interesting.
so most writers will ignore that. They just want the feedback so much they'll go out and read reviews. And I hope they only come across positive reviews.
Yeah.
But the danger is the bad one.
A review filter. I think that's a great idea. And the reason why I'm asking about that, because when I go to your website, it looks pretty intentional, but right at the top of the page, right there with the welcome, here's the reviews right off the bat. And so though you're highlighting some pretty outstanding comments from some notable people in the space, and I can't imagine that that's an accident, that that's on your website. So that's a good proof right there. And I think that's kind of why I wanted to bring that up for the authors listening, that, you need to celebrate those reviews. You need to put that out there, because it also helps other people read that and go, wow, if so-and-so said this about Douglas's work, then I'm curious now. I want to go check it out.
Yeah, I know. I've been very fortunate that I've had writers that I greatly, greatly admire who have said nice stuff about my work, like Robert J. Sawyer, Charles DeLint, who I'd mentioned before, and both Rob and Charles are friends. And Spider Robinson, just out of the blue, he got, I think he supported some Kickstarter, and I donated Impossibilia as one of the prizes. And out of the blue, he wrote me and just said all those nice things. I just read your book, and I just wanted to tell you. And so, yeah, I got those front and foremost on my website, and I'll use them a lot. And then if reviews are great, you have to know how to do pull quotes from them. And if you go to my review page, you'll see all sorts of pull quotes. So you don't, if the review is this long, you don't repost all of it, especially on, retail sites. You want to pull out that 1 or 2 very pithy comments, positive comments, obviously.
Yeah.
And if it's from a good source, then obviously you put them on your retail page for the books as well.
Excellent.
So,
yeah.
The reviews are great, but they're dangerous.
Yeah.
For beginning writers.
Right. So smithwriter.com is the website. Links in the show notes as always. So Douglas, as we head out the door, I appreciate your time. It's very generous of you to do this for us today. Just kind of wrap us up for the reader. I'd love for you to just kind of a closing thought for the reader that's coming into your world or has been part of your world for a long time now. I would love for you to talk to your community, and then maybe something just to close off again to wrap up for the authors. Maybe one more resource from your website or something we can close off with. Can we wrap up for those 2 specific people?
For the readers, I don't think I've mentioned this, but my last completed book was the 3rd book in a trilogy. It's called the Dream Rider Saga. I'm very proud of it. It's got all the reviews on Amazon are 4.5 and up for the 3 books. I think you will really, really, really like it. I'm very proud of those, and I think you'd have a lot of fun. It's got a diverse cast of characters, multiracial, orientation, and based in Toronto and then in Peru. Sort of my nod to something I loved as a kid, which was both superheroes, but also lost cities in the jungle. So I tried to mush them together, and I'm happy with the result. The writers, hold your breath and check back, and maybe in April, I'm working on another book for writers. This time it's on the craft side, and I'm calling it, working title, it may change, but I'm calling it Brick by Brick, How to Build a Story. And I'm in it. I'm giving what I think is a different approach to how you look at going from a story idea to building a story structure using scenes and how to use scenes properly. So yeah, that's going to be exclusive in a story bundle. If the readers can Google story bundle, but it should be coming out mid-April, curated by Kristen Catherine Rush. So the content of that bundle is
Nice. See, I knew you wouldn't disappoint. That's great, Douglas. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for sharing your time with us so graciously. I appreciate that. I'd love to have you back in the future and catch up. I know the audience loves to reconnect with our past guests and just keep their finger and thumb on you and know what's coming next and celebrate with you as well. So please keep me in mind. If we can never have you back, I'd love to have a few more minutes with you. It'd be great.
great. I'd love to come back, Dave. And again, thank you so much for having me on. This has been fun. You're a good interviewer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now you've got some musical stuff to talk to as well in your home and your family as well. So I'm glad we gave you a little bit of homework too. That's good. Yeah. I love it. Everyone, all the information, thanks, as always, in the show notes for Douglas. I'd love for you to go check out his book, books, like books galore, and smithwriter.com, the website. A lot of great information there. And if you're building a website and you're like, what should I have on my website? Here's a good example of some of the things you should consider as an author, putting your face out there and your stuff to the world. I think you can learn a lot just looking at smithwriter.com as well. So Douglas, again, thank you so much for being on the show. Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5. Kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.